and me. No matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you.
This is without doubt the greatest video game commercial of all time. With Nintendo encouraging their second-party developers to pitch games that would work as multiplayer party games, you'd think a fighting game starring all their iconic characters would have been a no-brainer, especially considering the N64 wasn't getting all the sick fighters that were coming out at the time. However, would you believe the idea came about by complete accident? The story begins with one Masahiro Sakurai, who at the time was best known as the creator of Kirby. Sakurai is one of the most passionate game designers you are likely to meet, so it should come as no surprise that he would work on personal projects during his downtime at HAL Laboratories. One of the projects that he and his buddies enjoyed working on the most was Dragon King, which was intended to be a 4-player fighting game that would appeal to a wider audience without sacrificing the complexity typically characterizing the genre. Once they had a working prototype, the group realized that they had made something really fun, so they decided to pitch it to Nintendo for full development. For the pitch, they put Mario, Donkey Kong, Samus, and Fox into the game, and balanced them with different stats and moves. The presentation was a success, and the team was given the green light to move into full production. However, when they started brainstorming ideas for theming, they were told to just stop and work more Nintendo characters into the game. Yep. Not only did Nintendo like the game itself, they liked the idea of a crossover brawler, and thus a fighting game dynasty was born. There isn't any sort of story to talk about here. Some of the imagery suggests that the action taking place is the result of a kid playing with his toys, but it doesn't add much to the game. Not that a story is really needed here because the game has more than enough star power to compensate. The Super Smash Bros. Came out at a relatively early point in Nintendo's life as a game maker. Keep in mind the game is almost 30 years old at this point. It's impressive how many franchises are represented here. You obviously have Mario and Zelda, but you also have Metroid, Star Fox, Pokemon, F-Zero, and of course, Kirby. Sakurai would also start his tradition of representing lesser-known games through the Smash series, as the main protagonist of Earthbound, Ness, appears as a playable character. Earthbound had famously bombed here in the States, and many attribute the large cult following Earthbound now enjoys in America to Ness's appearance here. This would end up becoming a frequent occurrence with the series, as other franchises like Fire Emblem and Kid Icarus would be introduced to modern audiences through the Super Smash Bros. Series. All these great characters are represented by some outstanding graphics too. All the characters that appear in the game are well rendered and beautifully animated. Levels all bring to mind the games that inspired them, and it all runs smooth as butter. It also just occurred to me that Super Smash Bros. Marks the first time a lot of these characters and franchises were represented in 3D. It's one thing to build character models and levels if you already have an idea of what they will look like in 3D, but it's something else entirely if everything beforehand was 2D. The best part of the game though is the sound design. The soundtrack is great, featuring a fine combination of original tracks and remixes, and the sound effects are just perfect. Every hit feels like it's landing with a ton of iron, and nothing is more gratifying than landing that killing blow that sends your opponent soaring into the stratosphere. Pretty good segue into the gameplay. Super Smash Bros. Is a fighting game, but it's playing with a different deck of cards. Most, if all, fighting games typically see players squaring up and trading blows as they try to drain each other's life bar. Super Smash Bros. Mixes things up by trading the health bar for a damage percentage. As you deal damage, the percentage goes up, and as the number goes up, the characters in a sense become lighter. So striking someone with 0% damage will just knock them back slightly, but doing the same to one with 100% damage is likely to send them flying off screen. This is exactly the point of the game. A typical game of Super Smash Bros. Plays out like a game of King of the Rock. You and up to 4 players are dropped onto a stage, and whoever can throw their opponents off the stage the most without falling off themselves within the span of 5 minutes wins. And this is a great gameplay hook. Though it will always be satisfying to land the final blow in a fighting game, the sense of empowerment you get by sending your opponent flying off the screen is unlike anything else in the genre. The controls are unique as well. Rather than using the traditional sits button system, the attacks in the game are instead simplified to just 2 buttons. one for normal melee attacks and one for special attacks, and you get different attacks depending on what position the stick is in when you push the button. The game also dispenses with complex button combinations, so it's more about knowing how to string the attacks together rather than knowing how to execute certain attacks. This system is easy enough to understand, but there's still plenty of complexity to it. From knowing what inputs will execute what attack, to coming to grips with more advanced mechanics like rolling and grabbing. Any area of the game where the fighting mechanics fall short though is made up for the fact that the game puts a little more focus on movement than other fighting games. Most other fighting games are very much like boxing matches. You can run but you can't hide, so you might as well fight. The levels in Super Smash Bros. Feature more room to move around, and that can be used to your advantage, be it using your mobility to stay at range, or doing your best to get back on the stage after you are thrown clear of it. Items will also randomly spawn during the match, so knowing what they do and how to best utilize them is key to victory as well. It all comes together to create a fighting game unlike any other, and it's always a good time. Whether you are doing a full 4-player game where you're just trying to survive the chaos, or going one-on-one, Super Smash Bros. Never fails to entertain. However, Super Smash Bros. Is so different from other fighting games that a lot of people debate whether or not it really qualifies as one. Some say that Super Smash Bros. Exists within its own genre, but I'd still say the game should be considered a proper fighting game. If anything, it acts as a good gateway fighting game. Games like Virtua Fighter and Tekken have attempted to be what Super Smash Bros. Is with its streamlined mechanics and what have you, but that always came at the cost of depth you typically see in Street Fighter. Super Smash Bros. On the other hand has a similar level of depth to Street Fighter, which it achieves not by discarding complexity, but instead shifting it to other aspects of the gameplay, in ways that appeal to people outside of fighting game circles. Could someone learn how to play Super Smash Bros. And then dominate Street Fighter? Probably not, but I'd imagine their experience with Smash and the enjoyment they found in mastering it would inspire them to give Street Fighter an honest go. Now, it's not to say that Super Smash Bros. Is without issue, but most of them come about as a result of being the first game in the series. The game features 12 playable characters and 9 stages, which is going to seem paltry in comparison to modern games. However, I feel there's a greater benefit to the smaller roster than people realize. Though people love a huge fighting game roster, what a lot of people don't realize is how hard it is to make that work. The bigger the roster, the harder it is to keep all the characters balanced and competitive. This is a problem that the original Super Smash Bros. Doesn't suffer from, as every character has clear strengths and weaknesses that allow them all to be competitive. I do wish that there were more stages though. It is a little disappointing that there isn't an F-Zero or Earthbound stage. You can't even unlock the game's Battlefield, Final Destination, or Metal Mario stage. The customization in matches is a little lacking too. I can't believe there isn't a way to turn the items off.
Continue?
Super Smash Bros. Was a huge hit back in the day, and it would become another consistent seller for the console till the end of its days. Sakurai would continue working on games with HAL Labs, but when Nintendo started getting ready to roll out the GameCube, they requested that he make a new Super Smash Bros. Game for them. A task Sakurai took to with much gusto, and the final product would go on to become one of the most beloved games in Nintendo's catalog. The presentation got a tremendous upgrade, the amount of content ballooned to immense levels, and the game was faster, more complex, and polished than ever before. Super Smash Bros. Melee would go on to become the best-selling game on the GameCube, and is still regarded as one of the best fighting games ever, with it still seeing frequent play at competitions like EVO. With the success of Melee, Super Smash Bros. Would become a Nintendo staple, with there being a game on every home console since. Something that has never sat well with Sakurai, who I'm getting the sense is a little sick of working on the series. Now, it's not to say that Sakurai has ever half-assed his efforts on the series. The man is passionate about what he does, so he's always going to be putting his best foot forward. However, the problem arises when you realize that Sakurai is always striving to make that perfect Smash game, and though he doesn't always achieve that, I'd say he has on several occasions. I would honestly say that Smash 4 and Ultimate are superior to Melee. Imagine putting in all that work and getting nothing but critical praise, only for the order to come down for a sequel. How do you improve upon perfection is likely what Sakurai hates about working on these games, and I do get that. I really do sympathize with his struggles, and I hope he realizes how much his efforts mean to the gaming community. That does beg the question though, will there be another Smash game? And the answer to that question is duh. Yes, there will be another Smash game at some point. The series is too popular for Nintendo not to continue it. How soon though? I do not know. The most recent game in the series, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, was made with the intention of it being the end-all be-all for the series, with it featuring every character in every stage, as well as several new ones that has ever appeared in the series. With the Switch 2 being backwards compatible, I can see Nintendo doing a Switch 2 upgrade with all the DLC fighters and new features added in addition to rolling out new DLC packs. Or they'll just make a new game, and I'd say that's more likely. I think the bigger question is whether or not Sakurai is going to be working on this one. I have a feeling he will, but if he decided to bow out this time, I wouldn't hold it against him. As far as I'm concerned, the man has nothing more to prove. Whatever comes next for him, he can rest easy knowing that he not only gave us one of the best fighting games of all time, but that he managed to improve upon it again and again and again.